Hello and welcome to another episode of the Student Loan Planner Podcast. Today I want to talk about a topic that I've been seeing come up a lot in our financial planning business that I think is relevant to all student loan borrowers. The theme is your goals are too polite. Do not fall for the polite goal trap because it will set you back from what you want most. So let me explain what I mean. One of the things we do for people that are coming in as financial planning clients, we ask, what are your 1 to 3 financial goals you want to achieve at some point in the next few years? People will say things like retire at 60, achieve financial independence, buy real estate to get passive income. Those are all reasonable goals. But the problem is that a lot of these goals are so sanitized. Like when somebody says, I want to retire at 60, okay, how'd you pick 60? Because you think that that's a reasonable amount of time in a career? Is that when you think your family and friends would say that it's socially acceptable to retire? Is that when you think you will suddenly get exhausted at work? Is that what you think you should say, right? So same thing for passive real estate, passive income through real estate. Okay, you want to make money by not having to do anything. That makes sense. Everybody wants that. Why real estate? What's the purpose? What got you into real estate? Did you hear something from somebody that you know that you consider yourself an equal to or smarter than making a bunch of money in real estate and you want to copy them? What is driving that? What is underneath that, right? Somebody's saying, I want to achieve financial independence. Well, why? What is the point of it? What are you trying to do? Where do you want to go? Do you want to take trips? Do you want to spend more time with your family and your friends? Are you trying to go to some special events every year that you currently don't have the time to go to? So I think what the pattern that I'm sharing with you is that people will give you the, grocery store answer or the church answer a lot of the times when you're asking about their goals. What I mean by that is you see a neighbor in the grocery store. Hey, how you doing, Tom? Oh, I'm great. How are you doing, Sue? Oh, great. Oh, how are the kids? Oh, wonderful. Oh, how wonderful. Have a great day. And that might be a rational interaction if your goal is to not have a deep conversation with somebody because you're in a hurry. But it's almost never true, right? I mean, it's sort of like an exchange of pleasantries. Now, in reality, maybe your day's going amazingly well, right? Maybe you just got a promotion at work. Maybe things are going super smooth. Maybe you just closed a big deal, something like that. Or maybe your day's going terrible. Maybe you're super tired because you stayed up late, watching a movie and your kids got sick and then you're super sleep deprived and, you just got a bunch of projects dumped on you at work and you're really behind. But you know what you say anyway? Like a lot of people that, I'm doing great. Everything's fine. I'm feeling wonderful. How are you doing? Right? So, I'm not trying to make this a meta episode or anything, but I think that it's worthwhile to reflect on what do you want in life? And I'll give you some clues as to things that I've seen that help kind of identify this. Do you have you made a lot of progress already in your finances, and are you sort of feeling like you still don't have enough and you want to retire, on the sooner side, but you're feeling really tired in general? Okay. So a lot of times I'll give you an example of the kind of person I see that fits this category. They've got $1 million in a brokerage account, $500,000 in retirement, $200,000 in cash. They've got a reasonable house payment. Both spouses are working and, fairly early in their careers, mid-30s, late 30s, early 40s, and they're like rushing towards achieving financial independence. And, they talk a lot about real estate or retiring early or something like that. And so for that kind of a person, I would say, okay, hit the brakes, hold up here. What do you want to do? What do you want right now? Pretend you won the lottery, $10 million tomorrow. What do you do? Most people will say, I'd like to cut my hours. I'd like to go on some nice trips with my family to fill in the blank favorite place. And I'd redo my kitchen or something like that, right? And I try to define what they mean by some of these different things. Like, okay, how many hours do you want to cut? Or you wanted to go 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week, 4-day weeks instead of 5? Like, what is the change you'd make in your schedule? Some people will say 2 days a week, but most people will say 3 or 4. And you say, okay, tell me more about, the trips you want to take. What's most important to you? Is it the hotels you stay at? Is it the experiences? Is it the food? Is it the, how you fly there? What's the most important thing to you there, right? And a lot of times when you do some analysis with folks like this that sort of have the generic, I want to retire early or as soon as possible kind of goal, you uncover that they might actually already be coast fire. And coast fire, what is that? Coast fire is I've saved up enough if I've saved nothing else to have my, let's pretend it's $1 million portfolio. If you save nothing else in 25 years, that 1 million is expected to be 2 or 3 million, and you could live off of that in retirement. In theory, I'm just making up a random family, right? But that's what coast fire means. What it means essentially for your lifestyle is that you could dramatically increase your lifestyle, or you could cut back on your working hours and make less money because your savings rate doesn't need to be as high. So a lot of people out there in their late 30s to early 40s have achieved coast fire and they don't even realize it, particularly when you think about loopholes available to folks that they're not thinking about. So what I mean by that is when you get to retirement age, let's say you want to retire at 60, well, you can spend down your money from 60 to 70 and then wait to claim Social Security until 70 and get a souped up benefit. So for example, if you're able to delay Social Security until 70, if you've got a decent income, there's a lot of strategy behind it as to who goes first, as if you have a spouse that's trying to claim, et cetera. But, essentially there's ways to get, $50,000, $60,000 a year in Social Security benefits. And that can allow you to spend more aggressively than the 4% rule if you're retiring sooner than 70, right? And then same thing for healthcare. There's loopholes like, if you retire before 65, before Medicare age, you can take advantage, of the ACA subsidies that can have you pay almost nothing for health insurance despite it costing a huge amount of money, right? So, thinking about loopholes available to folks just don't think about this. And they think, well, I've got to do whatever sounds good and whatever sounds responsible and reasonable because I don't want to be judged or I don't want other people to judge me. And I would argue that life is way too short to worry about that. I am a pot calling the kettle black here because I'm a people pleaser. I have trouble, with, wanting people to like me. And in reality, I think that you want to be a good person. You want to be respectful of others, that kind of thing. But ultimately, I think you have to decide what your values are and live according to your values and not worry so much if other folks think it's kind of weird, right? I mean, ultimately, we're all going to be dead one day, and all the worry that we gave to what other people think is not going to help us a whole lot, right? So what I'm trying to encourage you to do is think more boldly in 2026. Again, if you are already at coast fire, then maybe you experiment with working 4 days a week instead of 5 as soon as possible. Maybe you don't wait until 60 when you're older, when you've got back pain and you've got a knee brace on and, to enjoy the hiking trip that you've always wanted to take, right? Maybe if, you love traveling, maybe there's some kind of way that you could rethink your current job to enable you to travel more. Maybe not. Maybe the job you have is completely incompatible with travel. If so, you got to ask, is the trade-off worth it? Is it worth it to trade your time for money to give up the opportunity while you're young to go on some of these big lifetime trips that you might not be able to go on later in life? So, a couple other ones. A lot of times sometimes I should say, sometimes we encounter folks that are struggling with various kinds of addictions. And in my experience, addiction is usually because you have some kind of hole in your heart that is some kind of pain that you are self-medicating, right? And addictions come in a variety of different forms. There's shopping addictions, there's video game addictions, there's obviously like substance addictions, sexual addictions, greed addictions to money. There's all kinds of addictions, right? I think that it's important to think about, when you're going through something, maybe you're self-medicating with, like, I'll give you my own personal example, video games. I played way too many video games late at night, especially when my kids were really young, because it was my coping mechanism for being stressed out to the max. And, I would say don't beat yourself up, but ask yourself if you're struggling with any kind of addiction to anything, ask yourself, hey, how do I get a little bit better? How do I cope with the core problem and not, self-medicate it, right? So in other words, maybe there's a way that you could have, what we did when kids were super young, when we were both working, demanding jobs, is we were like, all right, I really feel like I have no choice but to get like a night doula in here to help me get some sleep, because I'm struggling with sleep. I'm struggling with being exhausted. I'm not being my best self anywhere. I've got to get some help, right? So that was the way we tried to tackle the core problem of me being exhausted all the time, and the exhaustion leading to stress, and the stress, causing me to want to play video games. I think that's an example of like how you get help if you're struggling with any kind of addiction of any kind. And addictions go in big varieties, right? There's, like softer addictions, right? Which is like the, one or two drinks every single night. I mean, that's not an addiction. I don't know. Some people would say it is. Some people would say it's not. But there's that version, and then there's the extreme version where you're like, unable to function, unable to, live a normal life. But a lot of those things get in the way of what we want, right? It gets in the way of what we want most. And so it's worth tackling. It's worth addressing. And it's worth saying, hey, maybe I can take, something that is that feels addicting and drop it to a safer level. And for some people, that safe level is going to be none at all, right? But I mean, there's all kinds of things that are popping up that you wouldn't think about, right? So I'll give an example when I say people's goals are too polite. A lot of people, let's just say somebody's struggling with a day trading or a gambling addiction, and they put in a form, I want to retire at 65. Well, that's good, and that's a reasonable goal, but maybe the honest goal needs to be, I want to take control of my sports gambling addiction. And that's maybe like something that takes time to trust somebody to share, and that's okay. But maybe you're worth it. And I'm not saying that you have, a lot of people listen to this, probably a majority are not going to have any really addictive kind of behaviors. But some will. And so I thought I'd mention it, right? But, and if only to yourself make your goals true and honest, right? You owe it to yourself to give yourself honest goals and not the sanitized, polite ones you think society wants to hear, right? The honest goals might be, here's just a random example. Like I mentioned, maybe I'm picking a hypothetical person here, but goal one, limit my sports gambling addiction to no more than $100 a week in wagers. I mean, that might be big progress to somebody trying to break a habit, right? Some people, again, might have to go cold turkey, but, number two, once I've controlled the first one, the sports gambling, now I can reduce my hours to 4 days a week instead of 5 to gain an extra day for self-care, physical activity, and just general enjoyment instead of being at the office, right? And then maybe third goal is realize that I don't want to be the richest person in the cemetery and go on a trip with my brother to Oktoberfest this year. I mean, I'm just making up things, right? But I think this is helpful financially to confront our own experience, our own lived experience. So, for example, I see a lot of people, there's different kinds of like things people grew up with. Some people that grew up in extreme scarcity will a lot of times carry those habits into adulthood, and they will constantly be, saving too much out of fear. And one nice thing about financial planning and stuff is you can look at math and you can calculate things and make projections. You can say, hey, this is a reasonable amount of spending. And a lot of people don't feel comfortable spending anywhere close to that because of how they grew up in abject poverty or in financial insecurity. And they're scared that they're going to go right back to that place. And sometimes it's important to confront those fears and just say, wait a second, if you have an occupation disability insurance, you're a physician, you make $300,000 a year, you have this like modest house, this modest car, unless you lose your license because of a substance addiction or you commit a crime and go to jail, there's virtually no chance that you lose your financial security. Now, that doesn't mean you go live high on the hog and spend every dime you make either. But what it does say is maybe somebody needs to confront their money habits from growing up and tackle those head on and not say, hey, I'm going to beat myself up when I buy a brand new mountain bike because I don't deserve it, because I need to protect my family, because I don't have financial security and the next crash is right around the corner, right? So I hope this is an episode that's encouraging, because what I would love for you to do in 2026 is write out your fake goals. I shouldn't say fake goals. They're real goals, but they're polite ones. Write out all your polite goals and then scratch them out, and then right next to it, what would you do if you wanted to be bold, right? Instead of retire at 65, maybe it's experiment with a 3-day work week this year. Instead of reach financial independence, maybe it's save up a screw you pile of money to be able to, leave my job for an extended period of time if something bad happens, right? Or if somebody is treating me in a way that I don't like, right? Maybe there are some giving goals too, like give away so much this year that it hurts. That would be a good one for me to think about. I think that I want to encourage you and open your horizons to a lot more than you ever dreamed possible. With student loans, that's really challenging, because with student loans, you carry this burden, and it's a physical, financial burden, but sometimes it's a burden of emotion. It's a burden of anxiety, of stress, of shame, sometimes of fear, right? Of feeling stuck in the mud. And you think, if I could have a normal goal of retiring at 65, that sounds awesome. Give me that all day, because I don't even think that could ever happen. But what we know about student loans is that mostly, at worst, they're an income tax. And so then the same financial math applies to someone with 6 figures of student debt that it does to any professional, with the caveat of optimizing for that 10% income tax, or if it's, a refinanced loan, of paying it back. And, and so in that case, the student loans no longer need to hold you back anymore. Okay, great. Now the goals that you have that are sanitized can get made more real, so that you can actually go for them and try to accomplish them. And there's ways you can get there faster, right? I will say that most of them involve, optimizing the earnings per hour worked. Sometimes that's through practice ownership. Sometimes that's through a well-crafted employee job. But, you deserve more. You deserve to really live. You deserve to make wild, crazy, ambitious goals that are honest and true and aspirational and just absolutely life-giving if you hit them. And that they're not achievable way off into the future, but they're achievable in the next at least 1 to 5 years. Ideally as soon as possible, because life is short. And the good news is, because you probably have a professional degree if you're listening to this, or you are an educated person generally, you have a lot more job security than other people do. You've got a lot more economic power than a lot of people do. You have a lot more choices. You're a lot more equipped with resources like this podcast to get the superpowers you need to take decisive action. So I'm excited for 2026 for you. Give yourself some real honest goals that you're really excited about, and rip up the boring ones, or at least file them away for a long-term trajectory, and then focus on getting some real exciting goals accomplished in the very near future. And, if you need help with student loans, Student Loan Planner can help you think through that part of it so you can do your own dreaming. That's studentloanplanner.com/book if you need a consult. And then if you want help with the accountability of staying on track for the goals that you set, that's what financial planning does. Our company, slpwealth.com, can help you with that. And then lastly, if you just want to leave a voicemail for a future episode of the pod, studentloanplanner.com/voicemail. Thank you so much for listening to the Student Loan Planner podcast. I hope you have a great rest of your week.